to my dream is to have another opportunity to fight him rematch, but so unfortunately he passed away after the fight. 2 weeks later after the fight, and I went to Mexico and I went to his grave and said, may his soul rest in peace.
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! This should be the round of the century. Look at Holyfield! What a warrior!
If he weighs 205, his heart weighs about 204. The fight. I can't believe it!
Unbelievable! Richard Steele stopped the fight with fewer than 5 seconds to go. You're going to watch Lou Duva go crazy now. You're going to watch Lou Duva go absolutely berserk.
Hello Boxing Asylum listeners and welcome to Punches from the Past, where we delve into the historical archives and talk about the fights that really mattered. Last week we got in and amongst the big heavyweights as Lewis and Klitschko fought over in America, and this week we slim right down in weight to the featherweights and the clash between Salvador Sanchez and Azumah Nelson, which took place on July the 21st, 1982 in Madison Square Garden. Now, my initial observations, guys, I'm just going to quickly get into them before you jump in. Just leading into the fight, the main thing that struck me really was there was just a huge disparity in experience between the two guys. I mean, Sanchez, despite being only 23, had a 44-1-1 record with 32 knockouts, including wins over guys like Wilfredo Gomez, Juan Laporta, Danny Lopez, Pat Cowdell, we mentioned earlier, Roberto Castanon. And I suppose, comparatively speaking, it's like a welterweight of today mixing with the likes of Garcia, Thurman, Porter, Brook and Spence and beating them all. I mean, that's the sort of level we're talking about with Sanchez. And Nelson, on the other hand, he was completely juxtaposed to this. He was 13-0 with a few Commonwealth title wins under his belt, fights in Zambia and Sierra Leone, and he'd only fought in America once before in a pretty nondescript bout. So coming in, he was a relative unknown, and he took the fight on 2 weeks' notice, even though he lost it, ultimately got knocked out. It was a gamble, I think, career-wise, that paid off, Andy.
Definitely, mate. Just to kind of give a background on both fighters, it's widely, perceived that Azumah Nelson is the greatest fighter ever to come out of Africa. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004. I think he was the first African to do so. Won the Commonwealth gold medal in 1978. Ended his amateur career with a 15-2 record. Basically what happened was Sanchez was meant to be facing against Mario Miranda, and then on 2 weeks' notice he had to pull out the fight. Now, Mickey Duff, who everybody will know, or a certain age will know, was one of the dons of British boxing back in the time. His finger in the pie with some African fighters like Bose Edwards, for instance. He basically had asked Nelson would he take the fight, and without a doubt he says I'll take the fight, no problem. But I think Don King, who was the promoter of the fight, he'd apparently was told that Nelson was apparently too strong for Sanchez. So apparently Sanchez's sparring partner went out to Africa to check him out, and the sparring partner came back and said the same to Sanchez, that it might not be a problem, but it was quite strong. We'll cover the rest of their career, as we speak. But just going on to Sanchez himself, as I've said before on the regular show, that Sanchez is one of my most favourite fighters of all time. Just taking into effect is he wasn't really affected by his status as a world champion. You know, he was one of 11 children, remained very close to his family. You know, when he entered that into the Nelson fight, you could probably say that his, you know, it's greatness basically this bestowed upon him, because if you just look at the way he fought, you know, tremendous balance, and the footwork was sublime. You know, the footwork and the balance is probably the most vital components of being in boxing. You know, as you say, February 2nd, 1980, age of 21, he was the youngest ever to pick up the featherweight crowns as Willie Pep, and he was still relatively unknown at that time actually until he beat Danny Lopez. Sorry, he was a great fighter, good puncher, and Lopez he could take a bit of a punishment as well. But as always, Sanchez found a way. He was very, very patient fighter. He could adapt. You know, he could fight on the ropes. He could fight inside. He could fight at distance. You know, he then went on to make something like 9 defences, his WBC title, as you said. Ruben Castillo, you know, was the first defence and started well, but Sanchez took command, you know, through that fight. They were talking about a rematch with Juan Laporte at some point. Part 4, they had major issues with Part 4. Part 4 was a very kind of upright, tall fighter. And again, you saw Sanchez again, you know, basically changing his game plan and come back with something else. Robert Constantine, as you say, Nicky Perez. The Wilfredo Gomez fight really was his breakout fight, I think, because Gomez was really pound for pound recognised the best puncher in the world at that point, and he just took him apart. And it really just showed how good his chin was as well, because he took a few shots in that fight. Now, like many geniuses, he did have his flaws in the ring. I suppose one of the main flaws I could see in him was he was open to the right hand. He used to keep his left hand quite low. But inside that, his head movement was tremendous. When he threw a punch, he always seemed to move his head off centre, rolling out of shots, especially on the ropes against Gomez and stuff, up against the ropes, left hooks and stuff, rolled under him. The left hooks he did take was absolutely frightening, and just basically brushed him off. I would probably be, you know, it's hard for me to say, because you think about 23, what he'd achieved at that point. He really was on the road to, you know, greatness. You know, you could probably even say that he might have been in the same bracket as Ali and Sugar Ray Robinson. But as I say, many geniuses have got flaws, and those were sports cars, which we'll basically get onto. But that's basically the background to Sanchez and Nelson's career going into that fight.
I think, Kurt, I was watching an interview with Azumah Nelson. Actually, he did it with the Australian journalist Paul Upham afterwards, and he alluded to the fact that I think he had problems with the gum shield or something coming in. He forgot to bring his own professional gum shield over with him, and he had to go out and buy an amateur one. Didn't quite fit, and he got a knife to it and cut it to size, and that maybe affected him during the fight. But I suppose that was another problem that he didn't need, as if coming into the fight only on a few weeks' notice wasn't bad enough. Not that he was in terrible condition, he was in brilliant condition, but he said himself afterwards, and Larry Holmes alluded it to in the commentary as well, he questioned whether Nelson could last the distance because of the poorer preparation. But despite being a relative unknown, he proved himself that night, and it gave us a precursor of what was to come with the career of Azumah Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, you know, with boxing, we get so many unknown fighters. You know, a foreign fighter will come to the UK, and, you know, foreign fighters will travel different countries, and, you know, for the most part, they'll be just brought over to be losers, just to lose. But, you know, the odd time there'll be a diamond in the rough. You know, and Salvador Sanchez played that part when he beat Danny Little Red Lopez a couple of years earlier. Most people at the time expected Lopez, who was a big puncher, to knock him out, because this was a guy who, you know, had a lot of fights but was only young. And, you know, if you look at his record, fought in Mexico a lot against guys, you know, just like Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., who had he fought, you know, are these guys all cab drivers? You don't know until they get in the ring and step up. A lot of them just fail. And he you know, beat Danny Lopez by stoppage, and he went on to show how great he was. And I think the same applied to Azumah Nelson. He came over, and most were expecting, you know, a tough guy. You know, he's from Ghana. These guys are known for being durable. They come over, they come to fight, but they just haven't got the technical skills or the talent to really, you know, push a guy. But I think Azumah Nelson, as Andy said, you know, he's the greatest. I mean, he came over, and the inexperience told in the end, I think. Yeah, I mean, Salvador Sanchez was only 23, but he'd been he'd been in many title fights, and I think if you just compare it to today's era, the guy won the title in 1980, and the Azumah Nelson fight was his 9th title defence in 1982. You 2 years, 9 title defenses. I mean, how often do you see that now? A guy sitting on the shelf, maybe fighting twice a year if we're lucky. This guy, wanted to fight, and Azumah came over and he put on an absolutely brilliant display. As we'll go into the fight in a minute, but yeah, I mean, if you were at the time, or if this fight was taking place at the weekend and we were sitting on a podcast, we'd expect Salvador Sanchez probably to win comfortably, and that's basically because we would have known nothing about Nelson. I mean, at the time you couldn't really you couldn't really find footage on the guy. Now we can go on YouTube and you can always find something, but at the time there probably wasn't anything. He hadn't really fought many times either, so he would have just he was like a keep busy fight. The guy he was supposed to fight was injured, so bring this guy over. Sanchez can look good, have a workout, and then move on. But after that fight, I don't know how people would have looked at Sanchez. They maybe would have said, he shouldn't have been struggling with this guy, or I think it's one of those. It's a great victory in hindsight. At the time, it probably wouldn't have looked it, but the career that Azumah went on to have, it just shown that. Another great fighter defeated by the great Salvador Sanchez, which is one of the biggest boxing tragedies of all time. I mean, a guy in his prime who was getting better and better, who was fighting anyone, wanted to fight the great Alexis Arguello, was killed in a car crash 3 weeks after this fight. I mean, it's a terrible tragedy because as a boxing fan, and to be selfish, just to think of all the great fights that he would take part in, this wasn't a guy like a Floyd Mayweather or one of these divas. This was a guy who wanted to fight everyone. He wanted to fight the best and wanted to prove himself to be the best, and it's a terrible shame.
Incidentally, I've noticed, see if he's 60 feet, actually, Nelson was only stopped once, and obviously that was with Sanchez, so just a testament as to how great Nelson was. I know as Kurt says, it's in hindsight, but if you look, as I say, we'll go into their careers afterwards and that as well, but if you just look at some of the names that Nelson fought, and if you actually go and watch some of the fights and that, he was a brutal puncher at times.
He was a big puncher, and I like the fact, I think you mentioned this actually, Andy, it's a sign of the times. Sanchez wasn't really sure about what he was expecting from Nelson, so you said he sent his sparring partner over to have a go with him.
No YouTube and iPads back then, they do it old-fashioned way,
Exactly. But I mean, if he didn't know too much about him before the fight, he certainly knew a lot about him early on. I must admit, even though you've told me a lot about Sanchez over the years, I said this to you before, I'd never really sat down and watched him before, and I must admit, as sacrilegious as it might sound, for the first few rounds I was starting to wonder what all the fuss was about, because Nelson was really putting it on him and hitting him with both hands, even dropping a little bit of a Ali shuffle into it in the first couple of rounds.
Yeah, because if you look at it, I mean, if you look at the fight when it starts off, Nelson just comes out and he lands a lead left hook pretty much 10 seconds into the fight, and the crowd's like, whoa, what the fuck? I kind of thing is with Chava was he was always a slow starter unless you really put it on him. Like the thing is, as Kurt mentioned as well with Wilfredo Gomez, he spoke a lot of shit to Sanchez, so maybe Sanchez came out in a different frame of mind. With Nelson, as you say, 13-0, you would think maybe he took him too lightly, maybe a little bit, maybe. But, it's a fight we're on. I mean, Nelson, he was prepared to punch with Sanchez at times as well. But I think when Sanchez did get the measure of him, actually, especially around about, I think it might have been around about the 5th or the 6th, might even be slightly later than that, actually, he started timing him with the lead left hook, but he was defensively responsible with it as well. But round 3, I probably need to try and give him a scorecard on that as well, but I think I need to have a quick look at it. But I'm sure I had something like at level after 4 rounds. Round 5, I did think that Nelson was starting, he started quick and he was probably trying to work the body a little bit more, but I thought Sanchez was looking to try, get a better hold of the fight, use the jab, let him around. I think Nelson got a good left hook in and he tried to trap Sanchez in the ropes, and then they went toe to toe. Both went into the trenches. That was kind of probably where his office was for Nelson. Whereas Sanchez, as I said, he could do anything. He could fight anywhere, off the ropes, at distance, inside. He was close to the full package. Now, if you're listening to this for the first time and never heard of Salvador Sanchez, you got to get up off your arse. You got to go into YouTube, because I'm telling you, if you love your pure boxers or guys close to it, Sanchez is your man.
And very not typical of the Mexican style either. You might
No.
look at his record, you see, oh, he's 30-1 or whatever with all these Mexicans, but he's not. His footwork for a Mexican fighter, they're not known for that type of movement as well. And I just think, Steve mentioned about Azumah Nelson's career as well. 14 years after this fight, Azumah Nelson was still a world champion. He still had a world title, and his next defeat after this fight was to the great Pernell Whitaker, lightweight. So it just shows you, we talked last week about Vitaly Klitschko, Lennox Lewis, a great fight, but we would have loved to have seen a rematch with both fighters, in camp for each other and what would have happened. And this is another perfect example of a fight where maybe a couple of years later, a rematch down the line. I mean, who knows what could happen, because Azumah Nelson was inexperienced at that time, but I believe Salvador Sanchez was getting better as well. Nelson definitely got better, and he was already good when, as he showed against the great Sanchez. So a rematch would have been fantastic. I think what Nelson did, he had the benefit of being able to know how Sanchez fought. He could, find footage of him. With Sanchez, he didn't have a clue, and I don't think his team had much of a clue. They just thought, oh, a tough African guy. And I think he knew he had faster hands than Sanchez, and I think he used like the same time punching type of technique where he wouldn't throw, but as soon as Sanchez went to throw a punch, he'd throw out his combinations. And if you notice the first few rounds, he was just throwing combinations, and he only threw when Sanchez threw, and he was just beating him to the punch.
He has no respect for Sanchez, not at all.
Not at all. Sanchez is waiting, trying to figure Nelson out. Nelson not giving him the chance to fill him out. He's throwing everything. He wants this title, John.
Yes, he does. And Sanchez doesn't seem to be able to get his rhythm going, Larry.
No, because this guy here is throwing all kinds of punches, having a good time out there. And if he can have a good time like this for 15 rounds, we might have a new champion here at Madison Square Garden tonight.
Then I thought he was winning the fight then, and he was looking good. And I thought after about 4 or 5 rounds, the upset was on the cards. But I think with Sanchez, he started throwing the jab in his face, and once the jab started landing, he started confusing Nelson, and then he was going to the body with it. And that's when I think with Sanchez, whether he's behind, he's losing, he's winning the fight easily, his expression never changes. He's got the same swag about him. He's got the low left hand. He's bouncing all the time. He's just, as you said, if you're a fan of pure boxers, I mean, his style is just fantastic. It's a pleasure to watch, really, as a boxing fan.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. When you talk about pure boxers, I mean, you got Johnny Famicion, Floyd Mayweather, I suppose, but you talk about, this is going to sound like a love-in because we're going to give both guys respect, but see Sanchez, because he could do it all, he was willing to take risks, he was willing to stand in the pocket, and to say, if you go and watch the fight itself, if you watch in between rounds, you never ever see Sanchez blowing out his arse. He's sitting there calm and composed, and there was an article out there somewhere as well about his heartbeat, and it was something irregular about it. I'll need to go see if I can dig up again. I should have actually got it for the show. He would basically step in, even though if he had to go the distance and that, he would really try and step in and try to end the fight. If it went the distance, it went the distance, but he tried to close the show. And if he had you hurt, he had you really in the hook. And if you look at the fight again at itself, I think it was round 7. Very early, I think Sanchez landed a left hook that badly staggered Nelson. And if you just, again, Nelson, man, I mean, even though he's got all this inexperienced stuff, it just, the sheer toughness and just came forward, kept trying to kind of slug it out. I think Sanchez then started landing 4-punch combos on him, and I think he dropped Nelson that round actually as well. But then again, the 8th, Sanchez wobbles Nelson again with another left hook, and again Nelson just drives forward. And you say, Steve, about his gum shield, I think it was the 6th round he mentioned it, because you're right, he cut the gum shield because he couldn't get one to basically fit his mouth, as you say, and you can't go to this, there wasn't sports shops back then where you could fucking buy a mouthpiece, you stick it in boiling water and then gum it into your shield like they do nowadays. But he actually apparently was badly cut in the mouth as well as a result of a punch in round 6 that basically caused the cut in the mouth.
I think one of the things that impressed me about Nelson as well was he wasn't a stereotypical fighter. He showed versatility. He came forward, he was strong, he was very fit, but he did throw to the body. Like in the 4th round, I think he slightly hurt Sanchez with the body shot. He showed a lot of speed, he showed a good chin, but also a good defence as well early on. And he was whenever he caught Sanchez, to Sanchez's great credit, he had a solid chin and that, but it wasn't until the 7th round really that I felt Sanchez really showed the class of a champion because he adjusted, he dropped Nelson, and he turned the tide from that point onwards.
Azumah Nelson has been a pleasant surprise. Nobody knew, because nobody had seen him before. But he is really a fine man, a fine boxer. Left hook. He's in trouble. He's got him in trouble. A left, solid left hook. And Azumah Nelson's in trouble.
Nelson will try to fight out of this. He's hurt. He's going to try to fight out. So Sanchez got to get him.
He's got that smile on his face. He has up to 4, 5, 6, 7.
And as you say, the left jab and the left hook started working. He realised what he had to do. He started to work this guy out. And Nelson was still moving forward from that point. But I felt he was a little bit more timid than he had been. And I mean, despite all the pressure that Nelson had put on in the first 6 rounds, Sanchez never really looked phased. He never looked like he was breathing. He never looked like he was panicking. And then from round 6 through till about 10, or 7 till 10, he started landing his own body shots. He started taking over. He started working out what he had to do, and he showed his great versatility.
Yeah, the other thing as well is, would anybody have believed up to about round 9 or round 10 that Nelson should still be in that fight? You know,
And throwing and hurting him in the 11th.
Exactly, because there was, we'll get to the 11th round, because I think Sanchez started it pretty quick, but I think Nelson then started working the midsection. He even got Sanchez to give him, give some ground at one point. I think in that 11th round, I think I maybe even gave that round to Nelson as well.
I think it was just so good to see, because you got a guy who's so, he's inexperienced. He's in over his head in terms of, where the other guys, who the guys fought and where he's in his career. He's come in as basically a keep busy fight, just, expecting to lose. We've seen it so many times where a guy comes in, he doesn't offer anything, he just comes over, takes the loss. But with Nelson, it was like, he truly believed he could win, and he truly knew that if he could cause an upset, it'd be massive for his career, or even a loss, which he did lose, but he impressed everybody, and he went on to have his career. He had no respect for Sanchez or that he was a champion or anything. He came over there with one thing, that he was going to knock him out, and he gave it his absolute all. And like I said, if the fight wasn't at short notice, who knows what would have happened, because at that point in time, Sanchez was training for a different fighter. He didn't know anything about Nelson. If Nelson had a bit more time, it could have went his way. You just don't know. And there's 2 great fighters going at it. And the 6th round, the left hook. Sanchez just leans down to his left, unleashes that left hook, full power. And Azumah Nelson the fight looked over for me there, because they showed a replay of it as well, and the sweat just flies everywhere. He looks absolutely done. I think that's when he walks back to the wrong corner as well.
Yeah, he's done that a few times now in that fight, mate.
I don't think he really recovered from that shot, but it was just pure heart and instinct that kept him going in the fight, and he knew that he was in the fight. And I think when Sanchez for the first 4 rounds stood and fought with him, that's when he was having his success. But when Sanchez boxed, he just showed his superior talent. And I think once Sanchez hurt him and had him hurt, he took over. I think Sanchez thought he had him, and then that gave... most of the fighters wouldn't have been able to, but it gave Nelson a bit of a hope, because he was standing in front of him again. And once he was throwing those bombs again, he was just coming forward, eating shots. And the crowd, I don't think they probably didn't know what to expect. They expected probably a routine victory from Sanchez, and not the exciting fight that we got. And for any boxer's last fight, you want it to be a great fight that people remember. And for the fans who've watched it and will watch it, this is Sanchez's last fight, and what a fight to go out on.
That was the 13th round you're talking about, mate, where he staggered him with that left hook again, with the sweat went spraying, I think, because the 11 and 12, I did think that I probably gave to Nelson. I need to double check the scorecard again. I'm saying to you.
Didn't the commentary team at that point, Andy, in the 13th, I think they commended the referee, Tony Perez, for what a great job he'd done. But I think it was more to do with the fighters. There was a real lack of clinching or any sort of dirty work. They just fought for the 15 rounds.
That was the thing, mate. That's what you want. A good referee's one you didn't see. As I said, 11 and 12, definite Nelson rounds, I kind of felt. But it's just because of the pressure he kept up. But then, as Kurt mentioned about that left hook in the 13th round, just going in, I didn't want to jump right into the 15th, but may as well just do it, because in 14, Sanchez, he kept the control going. The jab was amazing. Nelson he's faced like a bag of spanners, but he just kept coming again, fighting purely on instinct. And his legs, I did think his legs were starting to look to be given out. And then, obviously, again in the 15th, Nelson comes out, balls to the wall, man. Sanchez, he's counting him on Nelson on the ropes. Nelson just refused to yield. He was coming forward again, as I say, grotesquely slow in face, double left hook from Chava, just wobbles him. Nelson again tries to fight back, and then Chava drops him again with, I think it was 2 left hooks. And then if you actually look at the knockdown, Nelson's back on his feet, or bounced back up at the count of 5, and he's staggering about like a fucking buckfast drunk. But he got the chance to go on. It could have been a chance that Perez maybe kind of stopped the fight there. But you talk about a guy who gave so much. Maybe 90 seconds to go in the fight, or 30 seconds, whatever it was. You let him go on, but I think Sanchez stopped him with another 2 left shots or something like that, and dropped him in the corner, and that was it. But I think the stoppage was fair. Great fight all round. And as I said, I'll probably let you come in here because obviously there's other fights we could discuss here. Obviously the tragedy about Sanchez, but obviously the fights that Sanchez could have had. I mean, there was rumours that Sanchez only planned to fight for another year after the planned fight against Alexis Arguello. He was going to go become a doctor, apparently. This was according to the Ali guy. What do you call him? Guy on ABC, Howard Cosell. But if he continued fighting Sanchez, just think about it. If he won, just say he won the vast majority of these fights. I'm just going to throw these names out here and just see what you think. If he won either all these fights or the vast majority, if he lost a couple of fights and come back and won rematches and stuff, you could probably make a solid argument that he could probably be classed as TBE, the proper TBE. So you talk about Rocky Lockridge, Wilfredo Gomez rematch, maybe Barry McGuigan at some point, depending on the weight issue. Jeff Fennick may have been maybe a bit too late with the time frame.
Nelson rematch as well.
I think maybe Sanchez can move up in weight. The Nelson rematch, Pedrosa. Then you go up to 130. You've got Boza Edwards, Edwin Rosario, Hector Camacho, Bobby Chacon, Rafael Lemon, Roger Mayweather, Chavez. And if you did go to 135, I don't know if that'd be a bit of too much of a push, but Howard Davis, Ray Mancini, Jose Luis Ramirez. Come on, man! I think you could be talking about potentially one of the best ever.
Oh, definitely, yeah. The names were all there, weren't they? I mean, they were talking about him fighting Alexis Arguello. Wasn't there some kind of weight issue? Wasn't he? He was moving up, wasn't he, or due to move up?
Arguello was at lightweight at that time. I'm sure he was coming off the prior rematch loss.
Yes.
I'm sure it was around about that time. So you're talking. I think that'd have been too much at that point because Arguello coming down in weight. I mean, if Sanchez went from 126 to 135 for that fight, holy fuck.
And you got to remember as well. I mean, a couple of years after this fight, a Mexican fighter by the name of Julio Cesar Chavez came on the scene and won his first world title. I mean, could you imagine that Mexican fight between? I mean,
here's the thing, mate. Do you think Chavez would have had the reputation that he does nowadays if Sanchez had kept fighting and had been around at that time?
Good question.
I mean, after Sanchez died, I mean, Chavez, I mean, he became the greatest ever, didn't he, to be honest? I mean, what he went on to do, and Mexican fans obviously love him, and it's just a shame, like I said, it's just a tragedy because it's impossible to say what Sanchez would have went on to do. Like you said, he might have retired after a couple more fights. He might have said, "Oh, that's me done. I made my money. I'm out of here." Or he might have fought on for years and years. I mean, like I said, Azumah Nelson was still fighting in 1997, 1998. You know, still holding world titles. So who knows? I mean, you got all these guys around fighting for years and years. It's just hard to say. It's like one of those things when a guy dies so young. It's you see what they did in their career, and he's got one of the best careers, even though he's got he ended at 23, whereas fighters get the chance to go on and on. And yeah, I mean, a fight with him and Chavez and the names that you mentioned, and that the worst thing is, I got no doubt he would have fought them guys because that was the type of guy he was. There was no bullshitting around. He wanted to fight the best, and that's just we don't see enough of that now. Guys willing to fight. It's like Wilfredo Gomez. I hope fans listening go and watch that fight. Mexican Puerto Rico fight, massive puncher moving up. Sanchez was expected to, really be in trouble in that fight. This guy was a guy who, wherever he hit, they went. And, Sanchez could have bottled that fight. He could have made excuses. Or even in the fight, he could have went on the defense. He could have, said, "I'm staying away. I'm going to use my boxing skills." He didn't. He came straight out looking for him, looking to, he was the puncher in the fight, and he showed it, and no one expected him to do that. And that's the type of fighter he was. He didn't mess about in there. He wanted to prove to everyone, and just see the names he fought. So I think he's at 23 years of age, he has 5 Hall of Fame wins. I mean, that just tells you everything.
It does. And the thing is, I think the reason why this Nelson fight doesn't get discussed as much, is probably because of Nelson being 13-0 at the time. But then at that time, at featherweight, super featherweight, maybe even super bantamweight as well, it was great fights, and there were some good fights from about in that weight division. Aaron Pryor against Arguello up at lightweight, Chacon against Lamont, the 4th fight, I think that was fight of the year. Gomez against Pintor, another Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. That was another great fight.
I think with fights like this, though, I mean, they just deserve all the credit. It reminds me of like a Roy Jones against Bernard Hopkins. People say, oh, well, that Bernard Hopkins that Roy beat wasn't the same guy. Hopkins never lost again for another like 12 years. So you've got to say, Roy Jones did something incredible. And it's just like, the next guy to beat him was Pernell Whitaker, at lightweight, almost 10 years later. I mean, the guy was a great fighter. Yeah, he went on to be better. But as I said, Sanchez obviously would have improved, just like, Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins both was improving as well. So, that guy beat him, and, he beat him when he beat him, and that's all he could do. And, the fact is, both of them are great fighters. Both of them are Hall of Fame fighters. And, when they fought, it was a shame that they couldn't have a rematch. It was a shame that Nelson couldn't have had a few more big fights beforehand. But, it doesn't take away from either guy, and doesn't, we wouldn't have to lessen of the guy. Both are great fighters, and it's great to see, Sanchez fighting those type of guys, and Nelson went on to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think... Sorry,
No, I was just going to say, when the ending came, I mean, sometimes we seem to forget because of the fact that Nelson pushed him so close. The ending was emphatic. I mean, there's no doubt Sanchez beat him. He beat him. He hurt him. He finished him. He did what a champion does. And Nelson had really put him on him in that last round, and Sanchez came out and finished him. It was a comprehensive ending, if all the way through. I know one of the judges had Nelson ahead. I thought it was a very, very close fight. And I thought the crowd were getting into it really well. The garden was packed and they were really enjoying it. Don King was running around. Someone had some kind of kettle drum or some kind of implement, and I kept on thinking the bell was ringing for the end of the round. I kept on hearing this thing going in the crowd all the time. But they really were enjoying their boxing back then. And I believe actually back at that time, reading up on this, I read somewhere that the ABC used to show the fights a few days after they went out live. And that gave the fans a chance to get to know the personalities and to connect with them. So even though they were on a certain platform, ABC would show them a few days afterwards, and then everyone would get a chance to see it. So that's a different take.
But I don't know what version of the garden that was. I know there's been like 3 or 4 different Madison Square Gardens. But see, Sanchez's potential was unlimited. It really was. But I think I don't know what happened again. But I think he'd been driving his Porsche somewhere and he tried to overtake a truck and he's misjudged it. And he's seen a second one and he's slammed right into it.
He had only one affectation: sports cars. It was a love, maybe not an affectation, but a love that would ultimately cost him his very life. Because on Thursday past, that accident and death at the age of 23. The funeral was a sad occasion, but it was a proud occasion too, because the Mexican people were so proud of him. And he was a proud young man, proud because of what he had achieved.
But just see Nelson's career, actually. I mean, we talk about nowadays, like, undefeated fighters, get protected. There's no great, people could argue there's no great joy or no great achievement in retiring undefeated, because does it really prove that you fought the best, or does it really prove that you're really that great? Because Nelson's stock actually rose after getting defeated off Sanchez. I mean, he beat Irvin Mitchell. He became a legit contender. Won 4 fights. I think he even won the Commonwealth title in Nigeria. I think he then beat Hector Cortez and then badly knocked out Wilfredo Gomez. I don't know if that's another fight I'd probably recommend that people go and watch. I think it was a 13th round knockout. And when I talk about knockout, sorry, he got turned to liquid. And as you say, Steve, you just watched the fight there as well. Pat Cowdell, Olympic bronze medalist, smashed in one round. Danielo Cabrera, did Cabrera no fight McGuigan at one point?
Yeah, I couldn't say for sure on that name now. I'd have to look that up.
And, I think he beat Marcos Villasana. Really good fight. I think he beat him twice. Now, the other fight, I mean, I don't know if we speak about him nowadays, but Jim McDonnell, he kind of talks, it sounds like he's kind of slurring his words a little bit. Well,
Yeah.
if you go and watch his fight against Azumah Nelson, you can probably see why that's actually happened.
Was that the one where McDonald was really hanging on right at the end,
Aye.
and then he put him to bed in the 12th, was it?
Yep, he showed some balls, man. He showed some huge balls. Because he got knocked down, he got back up. I just checked there, yep, McGuigan beat him in the 14th round, then Nelson beat him the following fight in 10, Danielo Cabrera. And that was a brutal knockout as well, Cabrera against Nelson.
It's like I mentioned earlier about the rate that he was fighting, you know, a champion fighting so many times. I just read a New York Times, you know, about his death, and he was already in training when he died for a rematch with Juan Laporte on September the 15th. I mean, so that would have been his 10th defence in just 2 years. I mean, it's just, you just don't see it now, and this is why, you know, with this show, we hope that, you know, because we enjoy it, and we hope that listeners will you know, watch these fights, because, you know, there's a lot of people who are a bit disillusioned with the sport right now. You know, we know it's a great sport, but, you know, with some of the fights not getting made, or some of these shitty fights, you know, there's, you know, it ain't gonna be the end of boxing, because you just go on YouTube and there's thousands of fights, thousands of great moments, and that's hopefully, you know, people who aren't seeing this fight, you know, you could watch this fight or watch another Sanchez fight and become a fan, and, you know, that's why we wanted to do this show.
Yeah, I'd urge everyone to go out and watch this. Like I said, I wasn't overly familiar with the career of Salvador Sanchez, more so slightly with Azumah Nelson, but this is what it's all about, really. These are the fights that we're going to cover in this series, and I'm happy to learn and watch along with everybody else, and I would urge you to go out and watch it, because it is a fantastic fight, and it just goes to show these two fighters, stylistically opposed, but they really do gel together, and it breathes a bit of life and gives me a bit of hope when it comes to this sport. Is there anything else, guys, you want to add in before we draw this to a close?
Just echo your sentiments, mate. I mean, go and watch both fighters. If you go and watch the first fight between Jeff Fenech and Azumah Nelson, Nelson gets the decision. But my opinion, I think it was a draw, actually. I think Fenech basically pissed it out the park. And then the rematch, basically, I think it was 9 months later, and he knocked out Jeff Fenech in Australia, of all places, and it was classed as 1992 Upset of the Year by Ring Magazine. We've obviously had a third fight, had 4 fights with Jesse James Leha. I think they drew one, lost one, and I think he basically won the other 2 by, I think it might be right. No, sorry, he stopped him in the third fight, and he lost the 4th fight on points. You know, great fighter, as I say, the only fighter to stop him was the great Salvador Sanchez. As I say, Sanchez is one of my greatest fighters of all times, because the simple fact is he was a tremendous boxer, and he wasn't one of those pure technicians that would be happily just to kind of sit and box his way to a boring 12-round or 15-round decision. Sorry, he would basically try and put it on you, and he would try and knock you out. If he couldn't get it, he would try and damage you anyway.
And just one last point on the 15 rounds. I mean, we hear all about this sports science, nutrition. All these guys, they either turn up overweight, they can't make weight, and they struggle. After 6 rounds, they're blowing out their arse. You got 2 guys here, short notice fight for an Nelson. 15 rounds, go and watch the 15th round. Both are slugging it out like, you know, their lives depend on it. You know, it's just so good to watch, and that's what you get with a lot of these older fights. You know, fights that, you know, guys, they could just put it all on the line. They're fighting each other more. You know, it's never been perfect, but it just seemed now we're not getting that enough, and that's why a lot of fans are turning away and maybe moving to other sports, or just, you know, like me now, watching more of the older stuff and not bothering with a lot of the new stuff, because quite frankly, a lot of it's shite.
A very salient point to end on there from Kurt Ward, I think, in the latest episode of Punches from the Past. Kurt's been joined by Andy Patterson and me, Steve Wellings, as well. Thanks as always for listening in. I'm sure you found this on iTunes or Tumblr. We're also putting it directly on the Facebook page as well. If you're listening on there, there's a comment box below. Feel free to give us a shout and tell us what you think about the fights, or join us over on Twitter and tell us exactly how you found this fight or the previous episodes. We've done 2 Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley fights, and also Vitaly Klitschko, Lennox Lewis. Tell us what you thought of it, and if you have any suggestions for future episodes of Punches from the Past, then give us a shout out on that as well, and also like and subscribe to the YouTube, comment, and do all those beautiful things. We'll catch you again on a future edition, and thanks for listening, guys. Cheers.